The door of my cabin burst open before I even heard footsteps, and the storm roared in behind a body that hit the floor hard, wings splayed, breath ragged. I grabbed the nearest lantern and spun toward the noise, my heart slamming against my ribs, ready for anything except what I actually saw. A woman, if that word even applied, with feathered ridges along her arms and eyes like liquid amber, was sprawled across my floorboards, gasping, her wing bent at a wrong angle. Lightning cracked outside, lighting her up in flashes of blue, and for a second, I thought she was already dying. I did not have time to think. The wind was tearing at the open door, and something else was out there too, something that was not just weather. I heard it before I saw it, a low mechanical whine cutting through the thunder, sweeping closer with every second. I slammed the door shut and threw the iron bar across it, and the moment it locked, the whine outside grew louder, circling, searching. The woman on my floor pushed herself up on one arm, wincing, and her eyes found mine in the lantern light. She went still. Not the stillness of someone catching their breath, but the stillness of someone staring at a nightmare that had just stepped out of a story. Her lips moved, but no sound came at first, and when it did, her voice cracked with something close to horror. "You are human." I did not have the patience for that right then. The whine outside was circling my cabin now, slow and deliberate, like a predator checking every wall for a way in. "I am human, yes, and you are bleeding on my floor, while something is hunting you outside my house, so unless you plan to explain that in the next 10 seconds, I am going to assume the worst and prepare for it either way." She flinched at my tone, but something in her sharpened too, like fear was being replaced by calculation. "Scout drone," she said, forcing the words out between breaths. "Automated. It tracks heat and movement. It will not stop until it either finds me or its fuel runs out, and it has fuel for days. Days." I looked at the shuttered windows, at the door groaning under the wind, and I understood in that instant that this night was not going to end quietly. I moved to the window and cracked the shutter just enough to see a shape gliding low over the tree line, metallic, insect-shaped, sweeping a red light back and forth across the ground. It paused near the edge of my clearing, and my stomach dropped as the light steadied, pointing straight toward my cabin. "It sees the smoke," she said, following my gaze to the chimney. "Heat signature." I did not waste time arguing with a machine that could not hear me anyway. I crossed the room, kicked dirt from the hearth over what remained of the fire, and plunged us into near darkness, except for the lantern, which I shielded with a cloth in seconds. My hands were steady, though my mind was not, because somewhere between the storm and the drone and the stranger bleeding by my feet, I had stopped being a man alone in the woods and become a man responsible for someone else's life. "Why is it hunting you?" I asked, kneeling beside her, checking the wing that hung wrong from her shoulder. She hissed at my touch but did not pull away. "Because I ran," she said. "My transport went down in the storm 2 nights ago. The rest of my crew were taken by the same people who sent that drone. I got out. I have been moving since, and the storm was the only thing hiding me, until it drove me straight into your cabin." "Taken by who?" I asked, though part of me already suspected the answer would not comfort me. "Traitors," she said, and the word came out bitter, sharp, like something she had spat rather than spoken. "Ones who deal in things that should never be sold. My people are valuable to them. So, apparently, are humans, though your kind is harder to catch." That last part landed strange in my chest, but there was no time to sit with it. The whine outside grew louder again, and through the gap in the shutter, I watched the red light sweep closer, crawling along the tree line toward the clearing where my cabin stood alone. My hands moved on instinct, grabbing the old rifle from above the mantel, checking the chamber, feeling the familiar weight settle my nerves even though I had no idea if a bullet could do anything to a machine built to hunt through storms. "It cannot be shot down easily," she said, watching me load the rifle with something between disbelief and desperate hope. "The shell is reinforced, but the sensors on the underside, near the light, those are exposed. One clean hit there could blind it long enough for us to run." "Us?" I repeated, glancing at her. "Unless you plan to hand me over to save yourself," she said, and there was no accusation in it, only exhaustion, like she had already prepared for that possibility and made peace with it. I did not bother answering that with words. I moved to the window instead, watching the drone drift closer, its red light slicing through rain and wind, and I felt something old and stubborn rise up in me, the same feeling that had kept me alive through 6 winters alone on this moon. I was not about to let a machine walk into my home and take someone out of it, not while I still had breath in my lungs and a rifle in my hands. The drone reached the edge of the clearing and stopped. Its light swept once across the cabin, then again, slower, and I realized with a cold jolt that it had locked onto the residual heat still leaking from the chimney despite my efforts. It began to descend. "Get to the back room," I told her, already moving toward the door. "Stay low, stay quiet, and do not come out until I tell you." She grabbed my arm before I could leave, her grip surprisingly strong for someone who had been gasping on my floor minutes earlier. "You do not know what that thing can do," she said. "Neither does it know what I can do," I answered, and I meant it. Because whatever legends her people told about humans, I intended to make sure at least one of them was true tonight, for the right reasons. I slipped out the side door into the storm, rain hammering down instantly, cold enough to steal my breath. The drone hovered above the clearing, red light sweeping in slow arcs, its metal body slick and gleaming with rain. I moved along the tree line, staying low, using the trunks for cover, my rifle held steady despite the wind trying to rip it from my hands. My whole body screamed at me to run back inside, to bar the door and hope the storm would hide us both, but I knew that drone would not stop searching until it burned through every hiding place I had. The light swept toward me, and I dropped flat into the mud just as it passed, close enough that I felt the heat of its scanning beam brush across my back. My pulse hammered in my ears louder than the thunder. I crawled forward another few feet, angled myself against a fallen log, and waited until the drone turned its underside toward me as it pivoted to scan the cabin again. I fired once. The shot cracked through the storm, and for a heartbeat nothing happened, and I thought I had missed, that the whole plan had been for nothing. Then the drone jerked sideways, sparks spitting from its underside, its red light flickering wildly before dying out completely. It spun once, twice, then crashed into the mud a few feet from where I lay, metal screeching against rock, and then silence, real silence, broken only by rain. I did not wait to admire the wreck. I sprinted back to the cabin, soaked through, heart still slamming, and threw the door open to find her standing in the middle of the room, wing wrapped tight against her side, eyes wide with something that was no longer fear of me, but fear for me. "It is down," I said, breathless, dripping onto my own floor. "Blind, at least. It will not send a signal anymore, but whoever sent it will notice it went silent eventually." "Then we do not have long," she said, already moving toward the door despite her injury, and I realized in that moment she was not asking me to save her again. She was preparing to keep moving, to keep surviving, the way she must have been doing every hour since her transport went down. "You are in no condition to fly anywhere," I said, blocking her path gently. "Rest until first light. I will keep watch. If anyone else comes looking, they will have to get through me first." She studied my face for a long moment, rain still dripping from my hair onto the floor between us, and whatever image she had carried into my cabin about what humans were supposed to be seemed to finally crack apart and rebuild itself into something new. She did not thank me with words. She simply sat back down by the cold hearth, wrapped the blanket tighter around her shoulders, and allowed herself, for the first time since crashing onto my floor, to actually rest. I stayed awake through the rest of that storm, rifle across my knees, watching the tree line for any sign of movement, listening for any whine that might mean the hunters were not finished yet. Dawn came slow and gray, the storm finally breaking apart into scattered clouds, and with the first real light, her wing had healed enough that she could stand without wincing. At the door, she paused and looked back at me, amber eyes steady now instead of afraid. "Whatever they told me about your kind," she said, "they left out the part where a human would risk his own life for someone he never met." "Maybe that is the part worth telling from now on," I said. She nodded once, stepped out into the pale morning light, and rose into the sky until she was nothing more than a shadow against the clearing clouds, leaving me standing in my doorway, soaked, exhausted, and strangely certain that somewhere far from this moon, a new kind of story about humans was about to begin.